Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story. Okay.
The Tavrian rescue pod spun through the asteroid field like a dying leaf, its occupant minutes from a very cold, very permanent sleep. And somewhere in the black, a human freighter changed course. Nobody warned the galaxy what happens when you save a human's life. The distress beacon screamed through subspace on a frequency nobody with sense would answer. Too deep in the crash belt. Too many rocks moving too fast. Too much debris from the war that had chewed through this sector 6 months back. Captain Jorin Vell of the Tavrian science vessel Meridians, I knew all of this as he watched his ship die around him. Metal screamed. The hull buckled somewhere aft. Emergency lighting flickered like a heartbeat losing rhythm. Jorin's secondary hands moved across the console, rerouting power that wasn't there, sealing bulkheads that had already failed. His primary hands gripped the armrests of his command chair because there was nothing else to grip, and gripping was better than floating. The asteroid that had struck them 30 seconds ago, a lifetime ago, had come from the sector's blind spot. The collision alarms had sung for exactly 2 notes before the impact turned half his crew into memories and the other half into problems he couldn't solve. Engineering gone. Life support failing. Main drive. A twisted sculpture of metals that should never touch. The emergency pod bay had taken the brunt of the asteroid's kiss, which meant the 6 remaining pods were now part of the asteroid field's expanding collection. Except one. Jorin had found it on his 3rd sweep of the ship's schematic. Pod 7, tucked in a maintenance alcove that the original designers had added as an afterthought. Single occupant. 48 hours of air and rations. Beacon range of maybe, if he was lucky and the cosmic dice loved him, 3 light hours. The crash belt stretched for 30. He cycled through the distress protocols anyway. Standard Tavrian emergency frequency. Galactic Council broad spectrum. Even the old pre-war civilian channels that nobody monitored anymore, because the civilian traffic had learned to go around the belt after the first 100 ships vanished into the rocks. The beacon launched its scream into the black, and Jorin sealed the command deck behind him. The ship shuddered. Something vital gave up somewhere deep in her bones. Jorin ran. The corridors of the Meridians I had been clean that morning. Sterile. The kind of environment his people preferred, ordered, logical, free of the chaos that plagued less developed species. Now the walls wept coolant, and the floor was slick with fluids his secondary brain refused to identify. Overhead, the emergency lighting stuttered through colors that meant things his primary brain was too focused to interpret. Pod 7 waited where the schematic promised. Small. Cramped. Designed for species averaging 1.2 meters in height, which meant Jorin's 1.8 meter frame would spend the next 2 days folded like protein chains in a denatured state. The pod's interface blinked at him. Systems nominal. Occupant capacity. 1. Duration. 47.3 hours. 47 hours. Jorin's people had a saying. Hope is the last cruelty the universe saves for the desperate. He climbed into the pod anyway. The crash webbing tightened. The lid sealed. The Meridians I shuddered one final time. A death throw that rattled through the pod's shell. And then the explosive bolts fired, and Jorin was tumbling into the belt with nothing but 47 hours and a beacon that screamed into death space. He closed his tertiary eyelids and calculated probabilities. The math was unkind. 17 hours into his 47, Jorin woke to an alarm he didn't recognize. The pod's passive sensors showed something massive moving through the belt. Not an asteroid. The trajectory was too clean, too purposeful. A ship. Civilian configuration based on the drive signature. Small crew based on the power distribution. And it was burning toward his position like it had somewhere important to be, and Jorin was directly on the way. The beacon. Something had heard the beacon. Jorin's primary hands trembled as he routed the pod's minimal power to communications. The translator matrix cycled through 17,000 known languages before settling on galactic standard. This is Captain Jorin Vell of the Tavrian vessel Meridian Xi. Pod occupant requires immediate assistance. Life support failing. Requesting emergency extraction. The response came in a language the matrix didn't recognize. Harsh consonants. Vowels that seemed to take up more space than physics allowed. The matrix spun for 3 seconds before spitting out a translation that made Jorin's tertiary brain ache. Roger that, Pod. Seat tights. We're coming to you. The voice was wrong. Too casual. Too warm? The translator couldn't quite capture the emotional subtext, but Jorin's secondary brain flagged it as significant. Please identify your vessel and species, Jorin transmitted. Standard protocol. Know who's pulling you from the black before you let them pull you from the black. Freighter borrowed time out of the Sol system. You can call me Marcus. We'll have you aboard in 20 minutes. Sol system. The translator helpfully provided a star chart. A single yellow star on the far edge of Council space. Third planet. Species designation. Human. Jorin's tertiary brain pulled the relevant files. Humans. Recent additions to galactic civilization. Past the basic sentience threshold maybe 60 years ago. Still working through the various stages of cultural adjustment that came with discovering you weren't alone in the universe. Notable for their odd insistence on maintaining separate nation-states even after achieving space travel. Generally harmless. Prone to emotional decision-making. Avoided by most serious commercial operations due to their tendency toward unpredictability. The borrowed time materialized from the debris field like a ghost deciding to be solid. Jorin's sensors showed a ship that had seen better decades. Hull plates patched with materials that didn't match. Drive signatures that suggested someone had rebuilt the engine core with spare parts and optimism. Cargo hold big enough to swallow Jorin's pod 3 times over. The ship's grappler arms extended. Gentle as a parent lifting a child. The pod shuddered. Locked. Began moving toward the borrowed time's ventral bay. Through the pod's tiny viewport, Jorin caught a glimpse of the ship's name stenciled across the hull and with a translator marked as English, Terran Standard. Below it, someone had painted a second line in script that made his tertiary brain spin. Not all those who wander are lost. Asterisk the cargo bay swallowed him. Atmosphere hissed into the space. Gravity settled over the pod like a blanket. The pod's hatch unsealed. A face appeared in the opening. Bilateral symmetry. 2 eyes. Single mouth. Hair that defied the ordered aesthetic Jorin's people preferred. Dark, curling, pulled back in a way that suggested function over form. The human smiled. Welcome aboard, Marcus said. Let's get you out of that can. The borrowed time smelled wrong. Not bad. Just organic. Living. Jorin's olfactory sensors cataloged compounds that suggested recent food preparation, recycled atmosphere that carried traces of whatever the humans used for hygiene, and underneath it all, something warm that his tertiary brain kept trying to classify as occupied space. Marcus led him through corridors that would have horrified a Tavrian safety inspector. Exposed conduits. Jury-rigged systems. Wall panels held in place with what appeared to be industrial adhesive and hope. But everything worked. The lights stayed steady. The gravity didn't fluctuate. The air tasted clean despite its odd warmth. Medical bays this way, Marcus said, moving through the ship with the easy familiarity of someone who knew exactly which deck plates would hold weight and which ones were decorative. Nothing fancy, but we've got a scanner that'll tell us if you're dying and a synthesizer that can handle most biological configurations. I require minimal intervention, Jorin said. His translator rendered the words in that harsh, warm language. My injuries are psychological rather than physical. Marcus glanced back. The human's face did something complicated. Eyebrows rising. Mouth quirking at one corner. Eyes crinkling in a way that suggested amusement. Watched your ship die? Yes. Crew, 17. All presumed lost. The human's face shifted again. The amusement vanished. Something else took its place. Something Joe Rin's tertiary brain couldn't quite classify. "I'm sorry," Marcus said. The words hung in the corridor. Simple, direct, carrying weight that physics couldn't measure. Joe Rin's primary hands flexed. "Your assistance is appreciated. I will ensure the Tavrian Science Ministry compensates you appropriately for—" "We're not doing this for compensation," Marcus interrupted. The human's voice had gone quiet. Not angry, not dismissive, just firm. "We're doing this because you needed help and we could provide it. That is not standard protocol for commercial vessels. We're not a standard commercial vessel." Marcus pushed through a hatch into what Joe Rin's sensors identified as the medical bay. Small, cramped, equipment that looked like it had been assembled from 6 different manufacturers and 3 different technological eras. But clean, organized in a way that suggested someone actually knew what every piece did. "Sit." Marcus gestured to what Joe Rin assumed was an examination table. "Let's make sure you're actually okay." Joe Rin sat. The scanner hummed to life. Ancient tech, probably pre-human contact, based on the interface design. But it worked. The holographic display cycled through Joe Rin's biological systems with methodical efficiency. Marcus studied the readout. "Your tertiary cardiovascular system is running a little hot. Stress response. How do you know Tavrian physiology?" The human smiled again. That same expression that made Joe Rin's tertiary brain work overtime. "We hauled a Tavrian medical team to Epsilon Station 6 months back. Picked up a few things. Your people are good teachers when they want to be." The scanner beeped. Marcus tapped something on the interface, and a panel opened in the wall, revealing what looked like a food synthesizer that had been repurposed for medical use. "This is going to taste terrible," Marcus warned, pulling a small container from the synthesizer. "But it'll help with the stress hormones. Your people process trauma through your tertiary nervous system, right? This should help regulate that." Joe Rin accepted the container, studied the human. "You are unusually well-informed for a commercial freight operator. We're unusually well-traveled," Marcus corrected. "And we pay attention." The liquid in the container was the wrong color and smelled like something that should have stayed in a laboratory. Joe Rin drank it anyway, because refusing aid from someone who'd pulled you from certain death seemed like poor survival strategy. It tasted worse than it smelled. "Told you," Marcus said. But the human was smiling. The borrowed time had a crew of 4. Marcus introduced them over what the humans called dinner and what Joe Rin's nutritional analysis classified as biologically compatible but aesthetically disturbing. The food was hot, fresh, nothing like the synthesized rations the Meridians I had carried. "Sarah," Marcus gestured to a human with shorter hair and arms that looked like they could bend steel plating. "Engineering. If it's broken, she'll either fix it or convince it to work anyway." Sarah nodded, didn't smile, looked at Joe Rin the way Joe Rin's people looked at particularly interesting data sets. "Chun," Marcus continued, indicating a smaller human with hair that fell past their shoulders and hands that moved with precise, deliberate grace. "Navigation and communications. Also makes the best coffee in 3 sectors. Coffee is a mild stimulant beverage," Chun added. Their voice was softer than Marcus's. "Gentler. I can synthesize a Tavrian equivalent if you'd like." "Yuki," Marcus finished, gesturing to the 4th human. Youngest of the group based on the facial structure analysis Joe Rin's secondary brain provided. Hair that shifted between black and blue depending on the light. Eyes that seemed to take in everything and followed away for later consideration. Cargo and operations. Also our resident linguist. 17 languages and counting, Yuki said. The pride in their voice was unmistakable even through the translator. "How's your standard?" "The translator's decent, but it tends to flatten emotional context." "My standard is functional," Joe Rin replied, testing the words on his vocal apparatus. The sounds came out rougher than he intended. Galactic Standard had been designed for species with bilateral vocal structures. Joe Rin's trilateral configuration made certain phonemes challenging. "Functional works," Yuki said. Smiled. "We'll get you to Epsilon Station in 3 days. They've got a Tavrian consulate there." should be able to help you contact your people. 3 days. Joe Rin's tertiary brain calculated the fuel cost, the time investment, the opportunity cost of a commercial freighter diverting from its planned route to deliver a single survivor to a diplomatic outpost. The compensation for this service is that you survive, Marcus interrupted. Again, the human seemed to make a habit of interrupting. And maybe if you're feeling generous, you tell people that the borrowed time isn't full of the pirates and smugglers the council seems to think we are. You are not registered with the Commercial Shipping Authority, Joe Rin observed. His secondary brain had pulled the relevant databases during the medical scan. Your vessel operates in a legal gray area that most council species would classify as suspicious. Most council species, Sarah said, speaking for the first time, wouldn't have pulled you from that debris field. The words landed like a physical impact. The galley went quiet. Marcus cleared his throat. What Sarah means is that we operate outside standard channels because standard channels have a lot of rules that don't always make sense. But we're not criminals. We're just flexible. Flexible, Joe Rin repeated. We go where the work is, Chen added. Help who needs helping. Take jobs that the big shipping companies won't touch because the profit margins aren't worth their time. You rescued me for no profit. We rescued you because you needed rescuing, Marcus said. Simple. Direct. Like it was the most obvious thing in the universe. Everything else is just logistics. Joe Rin's tertiary brain spun through the implications. The cultural files on humans had mentioned their tendency toward irrational altruism. Their odd insistence on helping even when helping provided no measurable benefit. The academic papers had classified it as a holdover from their pre-contact evolution. A survival strategy that had served them well when they were isolated on their single planet, but would likely be selected against as they integrated into galactic civilization. The papers had been wrong, or the humans hadn't read them. I am in your debt, Joe Rin said, because his people had protocols for this even if the humans apparently didn't. Marcus waved a hand. Dismissive. You're our guest. Guests don't carry debts. They just eat terrible food and tolerate our company for a few days. The food wasn't terrible. Different. Strange. But not terrible. Joe Rin ate it anyway. The borrowed time navigated the Kresh belt like it had been born there. Joe Rin spent the first day watching from the observation deck, a small, cramped space that the crew had converted into something between a lounge and a shrine to whatever humans considered beautiful. Photographs lined the walls. Places. People. Moments captured and frozen and displayed like they mattered. Chen joined him on the second watch, brought 2 containers of the coffee beverage, and settled into the seat beside Joe Rin's with the comfortable silence of someone who didn't feel the need to fill every moment with sound. You're wondering why we did it, Chun said after 10 minutes. Your species is classified as emotionally driven, Joe Rin replied. The rescue aligns with your documented behavioral patterns. Chun laughed. Soft, not mocking. That's a very diplomatic way of saying we're irrational. I did not intend, it's fine. Chun sipped their coffee. We are irrational, by most species standards. We make decisions based on feelings instead of logic. We help when helping doesn't benefit us. We remember things that happened to people we'll never meet, and let those memories change what we do today. Joe Rin's tertiary brain flagged this as significant. You remember aid provided to others? We remember everything, Chen said. Quiet, like they were sharing a secret. Every kindness, every cruelty, every time someone helped when they didn't have to, every time someone walked past when they could have stopped. That seems inefficient. Probably. Chen smiled into their coffee. But it's how we work. Someone helped us once, long time ago. Species called the Ventari. We were new to space. Didn't know the rules. Didn't know the dangers. Ventari's ship found one of our early colony vessels drifting after a reactor failure. Could have left us. Would have been the logical choice. We had nothing to offer, no way to pay them back. They helped anyway. They helped anyway. Chen's voice carried something Joe Rin's translator marked as reverence. Spent 2 weeks towing our ship to safety. Shared their supplies. Taught us what we needed to know. Never asked for anything in return. And you remember this. Humanity remembers this. Chin turned to look at Jorin. Their eyes carried weight. We're still new to the galaxy. Still figuring out how we fit. But that one thing that we know, when someone needs help, you help. Because someone helped us once, and we never forgot. Through the observation port, the belt spun its endless dance. Rocks and ice and debris from ships that hadn't been as lucky as the borrowed time. The Ventari, Jorin said. Where are they now? Chen's expression shifted. Something painful crossed their features. Gone. Plague hit their homeworld 8 years ago. Wiped out 90% of their population before the council could organize a medical response. I'm sorry for your loss. Not our loss, Chen corrected. Gentle. Theirs. But we remember. And we help. Because that's what they would have done. The words settled into Jorin's tertiary consciousness like seeds in fertile soil. This is why you altered your route, he said. Not a question. An understanding. This is why we altered our route, Chun agreed. Someone needed help. We could provide it. Everything else is just details. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the belt pass by, drinking their beverages, existing in a moment that required no words because the meaning was already clear. Jorin's people had a saying. The universe is indifferent to suffering. Watching Chin's reflection in the observation port, Jorin wondered if his people had been looking at the wrong part of the universe. Epsilon Station materialized from the black like a city deciding to exist in 3 dimensions. Jorin had visited it twice before. Standard Tavrian diplomatic outpost. Efficient. Organized. Sterile in the way his people preferred. The docking procedures were precise. The customs protocols were thorough. Everything happened exactly as it was supposed to happen because chaos was inefficient and efficiency was sacred. The borrowed time did not care about sacred efficiency. Marcus brought them in on a trajectory that made the station's traffic control sputter through 17 increasingly urgent warnings. Sarah laughed from engineering, calling up stats that showed they were technically within parameters, even if those parameters were being interpreted creatively. Chun handled communications with the patient tone of someone explaining basic concepts to a particularly slow student. They docked. The station's gravity settled over Jorin like a familiar weight. The air tasted recycled. Clean. Nothing like the warm, living atmosphere of the borrowed time. The Tavrian consulate representative met him at the airlock. Junior diplomat based on the markings. Professional. Concerned in the appropriate measured way. Captain Vell, we received word of the Meridian's IS loss. The Science Ministry has been notified. Arrangements are being made for your transport back to the homeworld. Standard procedure. Standard words. Standard everything. Behind Jorin, the crew of the borrowed time stood in their not quite matching jumpsuits, looking like they just stepped out of the salvage yard and didn't quite care. I require a moment, Jorin told the diplomat. He turned to face the humans. Marcus spoke first. Good luck out there. Try not to run into any more asteroids. I will endeavor to maintain better situational awareness, Jorin replied. Formal. Because formal was safe, and he didn't have words for what he was feeling. Sarah nodded. Didn't smile. Didn't need to. Chen offered a small wave. Take care of yourself. And if you're ever near Sol System, stop by. We'll show you what real coffee tastes like. Yuki grinned. Tell your people that humans aren't all pirates and smugglers. Some of us are just chronically helpful. The words caught in Jorin's trilateral vocal structure. His tertiary brain spun through diplomatic protocols and found nothing that fit. I am in your debt, he said finally. Because it was true even if the humans wouldn't acknowledge it. You're not, Marcus said. Gentle. You're just someone who needed help. We were glad we could provide it. The airlock began its cycling sequence. The human stepped back. The door slid closed between them. Through the small viewport, Jorin watched them walk back into their ship. Casual. Unhurried. Like rescuing stranded aliens was just another day's work. The diplomat touched his shoulder. Captain, we should proceed to the consulate. There are many arrangements to make. Jorin nodded. Followed. Let the efficient, sterile corridors of Epsilon Station swallow him. But his tertiary brain kept spinning, kept calculating. kept remembering the warmth of the borrowed time and the casual way Marcus had said we help because someone helped us once. The Tavrian Science Ministry would want a full report. The loss of meridians, I would require investigation. There would be forms, protocols, proceedings. Jorin would complete them all. But first, he had a message to compose. A message about humans, about kindness, about a small freighter crew who had altered their route for no profit and asked for nothing in return. The galaxy needed to know. Someone had to remember. The Tavrian Science Ministry received Jorin's report with the enthusiasm of accountants discovering an unexpected tax liability. 17 dead. 1 vessel destroyed. Total loss valued at approximately 40 million credits. Cause: navigational error in a restricted zone. Recommendation: increased safety protocols and mandatory corridor adjustments for all civilian science vessels operating near post-conflict sectors. Attached addendum: personal testimony regarding human-operated vessel borrowed time and crew conduct during emergency extraction. The addendum sat in the system for 3 days before anyone read it. On the 4th day, it landed on the desk of Senior Administrator Kelf, who had been managing Tavrian human relations since the species had stumbled into council space with their mismatched fleet and their peculiar insistence on emotional decision-making. Kelf read it twice. Then, she read it again. Then, she composed a message to the human diplomatic mission on Tavrian Prime because certain things required face-to-face conversation, and this was absolutely one of them. Ambassador Rachel Kim had been representing humanity to the Tavrian Science Ministry for 8 months. 8 months of explaining that no, humans didn't actually make all their decisions based on emotion, and yes, they understood probability theory, and no, the fact that human children's literature often featured talking animals did not indicate a fundamental confusion about biological classification systems. The Tavrians were brilliant, logical, precise to the point of being exhausting. They were also absolutely convinced that humanity was one impulsive decision away from accidentally declaring war on the universe. Rachel's assistant knocked on her office door at 0800 local time. Ambassador? Senior Administrator Kelf is here. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's regarding Captain Vell's report. Rachel pulled up the file, skimmed it, felt something warm settle in her chest. Sent her in. Kelf entered with the controlled grace of someone who had spent decades perfecting the art of appearing completely unbothered by chaos. She was tall, even for a Tavrian, her tertiary arms folded in what Rachel's cultural briefing identified as a gesture of formal respect. Ambassador Kimu, thank you for seeing me without prior arrangement. Of course. Rachel gestured to the visitor's chair. I assume this is about the Meridian's Eye incident. It is about the humans who intervened. Kelf settled into the chair with the precise movements of someone who thought about furniture ergonomics. The vessel borrowed time. Crew of 4. Commercial freight operation, though our records indicate they operate without formal CSA registration. Rachel kept her expression neutral. They're independent contractors. Not uncommon for human shipping operations. They altered their route to extract Captain Vell from the Kresh Belt debris field. That's what the report says. Kelfa's tertiary hands flexed. Subtle. But Rachel had learned to read Tavrian microexpressions, and that particular gesture meant something was bothering the administrator. They refuse compensation. Also not uncommon. Some human operators follow a personal code that prioritizes aid over profit. This is inefficient. Rachel smiled. Gentle. By your standards, probably. By ours, it's called being decent. Kelf was quiet for a long moment. Her primary hands folded on the desk. Her secondary hands remained relaxed. Her tertiary hands continued their subtle flexing. We have reviewed the cultural files on humanity, Kel said finally. Your species exhibits what we classify as altruistic overextension. You help even when helping provides no measurable benefit. You form attachments to individuals outside your genetic line. You maintain social bonds across vast distances despite minimal practical interaction. Guilty as charged. The file suggests this behavior is a holdover from your pre-contact evolution. that it will be selected against as you integrate into galactic civilization. Rachel's smile shifted, hardened slightly. The files are wrong. Kelfa's tertiary hand stilled. Captain Vell's report includes a conversation with one of your crew members, Kelf continued, regarding a species called the Ventari, regarding aid provided 60 years ago during humanity's early contact period. I'm familiar with the incident. Your species remembers this. It wasn't a question, but Rachel answered anyway. We do. Why? The word hung in the office like smoke. Rachel leaned back in her chair, studied the Tavrian administrator. Because someone helped us when they didn't have to. Because we were lost and scared and completely out of our depth. And they stopped. They helped. They asked for nothing. And we never forgot. The Ventari are extinct. The Ventari suffered a catastrophic plague event 8 years ago. Their population was decimated. They are not extinct, but their civilization will likely take generations to recover. You are aware of this. We are very aware of this. Kelfa's tertiary hands resumed their flexing. Faster now. Agitated in a way Rachel was learning to recognize as the Tavrian equivalent of barely controlled frustration. Captain Vell believes humanity operates under a cultural imperative of reciprocal altruism, that your species maintains a collective memory of aid received, and feels compelled to provide equivalent aid to others. That's a very academic way of describing it, Rachel said. But yeah, someone was kind to us once. We remember. We pay it forward. This is irrational. This is human. Kel stood, paced to the window, overlooking the embassy gardens. Her reflection in the glass showed all 6 hands in motion, primary, secondary, tertiary, each set processing the information in whatever parallel way Tavrian neurology worked. The Ventari plague, Kelf said, not looking at Rachel. Your species provided aid. We did. Medical supplies, research personnel, quarantine support, among other things. The cost of this aid exceeded 2 billion credits. Money well spent. Kelf turned. Her eyes, all 3 sets of them, fixed on Rachel with the intensity of someone solving an equation they didn't like the answer to. You did this for a species that helped you 60 years ago. That had no current political value. No strategic significance. No resource availability that would benefit humanity. We did this because they needed help, and we could provide it, Rachel said. Simple. Direct. The same words Marcus had probably used in that cargo hold. Everything else is just logistics. The office went quiet. Outside, the Tavrian capital continued its efficient, organized existence. Traffic flowed in precise patterns. Citizens moved along designated pathways. Everything happened exactly as it was supposed to because order was sacred and chaos was the enemy. Your species is dangerous, Kelf said finally. Rachel's eyebrows rose. That's a concerning statement from a diplomatic liaison. Dangerous in ways the council does not understand. Kelf returned to her chair. Saturday. All 6 hands folded in what Rachel's cultural database marked as a gesture of complete honesty. You remember everything. You help everyone. You operate under moral imperatives that supersede logical calculation. And you do all of this while maintaining the industrial and military capacity to enforce your decisions if necessary. We're not interested in enforcement. We're interested in helping. Now, but what happens when the galaxy does not want your help? When your altruism conflicts with established order. When your remembered debts demand action that destabilizes existing power structures. Rachel leaned forward. Are you asking what happens when humanity decides to repay a debt? Or are you asking what happens when we decide to collect one? Kelfa's tertiary hands flexed. Both, the administrator said. The message reached Marcus 3 weeks later. The borrowed time was hauling agricultural equipment to a colony world when Chun flagged the incoming transmission. Official channel. Tavrian diplomatique cell. Marked priority, but not urgent, which meant someone wanted attention, but wasn't panicking yet. Marcus opened it in the galley over coffee that had gone lukewarm. The message was brief, formal, extremely polite in a way that suggested someone had spent hours crafting each sentence to achieve maximum diplomatic neutrality. Captain Marcus Chun of the vessel Borrowed Time, asterisk on behalf of the Tavrian Science Ministry, and the personal gratitude of Captain Jorin Vel, we extend our appreciation for your assistance during the Meridian's Eye incident. Captain Vel has made clear that your intervention saved his life and that your crew conducted themselves with exceptional professionalism and compassion. Asterisk, we understand your vessel operates independently and that you decline material compensation. We respect this decision. Asterisk, however, we wish to extend an invitation for you and your crew to visit Tavrian Prime at your convenience. We believe there are opportunities for cultural exchange that would benefit both our peoples. Asterisk, we also wish to discuss a matter of mutual interest regarding historical debts and future cooperation. Asterisk, please respond at your earliest convenience. Asterisk, with respect. Asterisk, Senior Administrator Kelth. Asterisk, Tavrian Human Relations Office. Asterisk, Marcus. Read it twice. Sarah looked over his shoulder. That's either a very nice invitation or a very polite threat. Could be both, Chen observed from the navigation console. Tavrians don't do casual. If they're asking us to visit, there's a reason. Historical debts. Yuki quoted from across the galley. That's an interesting phrase. Marcus sipped his cold coffee. Grimaced. Made fresh coffee because thinking required caffeine, and this message definitely required thinking. We pulled one guy from a debris field, he said. That doesn't usually result in diplomatic invitations. We pulled one guy from a debris field and asked for nothing, Sarah corrected. That apparently made an impression. Humans making impressions, Chun said. Their voice carried amusement. That never causes complications. Marcus composed a response. Kept it brief, polite, professional in a way that suggested he absolutely knew this wasn't a casual invitation, but was willing to pretend it might be. Senior Administrator Kelth, asterisk, we appreciate the recognition and would be happy to visit Tavrian Prime when our schedule allows. We're currently 3 weeks from completing our current contract. We could route toward your system after that. Asterisk, looking forward to discussing matters of mutual interest. Asterisk, Captain Marcus Chun, asterisk, Borrowed Time, asterisk, he sent it. Then he looked at his crew. Thoughts? They want something, Sarah said. Blunt. Direct. Question is whether we want to give it to them. We don't even know what they want, Yuki pointed out. They want to understand us, Chun said. Quiet. Thoughtful. We scared them. Not with weapons or threats. With kindness. With remembering. With being exactly what the academic papers say we shouldn't be. Marcus drained his fresh coffee. So we show them who we are. And if that makes them more scared, then they'll have accurate information to be scared with, Marcus said. Better than letting them imagine the worst. The Borrowed Time adjusted its route. 3 weeks to finish the agricultural run. Then Tavrian Prime. Then whatever came next. Jorin Vel stood in the observation gallery of the Tavrian Science Ministry's orbital platform and watched the Borrowed Time approach. The ship looked exactly as he remembered. Mismatched hull plates. Drive configuration that suggested optimistic engineering. Paint job that had probably been applied by someone who considered aesthetics a secondary concern at best. Beautiful in its absolute refusal to care what anyone thought. They are cleared for docking at Port 7, Administrator Kell said from beside him. She had been standing there for 20 minutes, watching the approach with the same intensity Jorin usually reserved for experimental data. Standard diplomatic protocols apply. They will not care about diplomatic protocols, Jorin said. I am aware. The Borrowed Time docked with the casual precision of a ship that had done this 1,000 times in 100 different ports. No wasted movement. No unnecessary connections. Just smooth, efficient integration with the station systems. Professional despite the appearance. Jorin's tertiary brain noted this. Filed it. Added it to the growing collection of observations about humans that didn't match their official classifications. Captain Vel. Kelth's voice pulled him from his analysis. The crew will expect to see you. They will want confirmation that their aid resulted in positive outcomes. You have studied human psychology. I have studied human behavior patterns. They maintain social bonds through validation and reassurance. Your testimony is important to them. Jorin nodded, adjusted his formal sash. checked that his tertiary hands were positioned in the appropriate gesture of greeting. The airlock cycled. For humans emerged. Marcus first, moving with that same casual confidence. Sarah behind him, scanning the docking port like she was already calculating structural improvements. Chin next, holding what appeared to be a portable beverage container, probably coffee. Yuki last, looking around with open curiosity that seemed completely unbothered by the formal diplomatic setting. They saw Joe Rin. Marcus smiled. "Hey, you're alive. That's excellent." The greeting was completely inappropriate for formal diplomatic context. No honorifiques. No acknowledgement of rank or status. Just genuine pleasure that Joe Rin had survived. Joe Rin's tertiary brain spun through proper responses and discarded all of them. "Your assistance ensured this outcome," he said. "I am grateful. We're glad we could help," Marcus replied. Then, because humans apparently couldn't help themselves, "How are you doing? Really doing? Losing a ship and crew is traumatic as hell." The casual profanity. The direct emotional inquiry. The complete disregard for the fact that they were standing in a formal diplomatic receiving area with Senior Administrator Kelf watching every interaction. Joe Rin felt something in his tertiary consciousness relax. "I am recovering," he said. "The Science Ministry has provided appropriate psychological support. I have been reassigned to a research position that does not require space travel." "Good," Sarah said. First word she'd spoken, carrying the weight of someone who understood exactly what trauma could do. "Take care of yourself. We brought coffee," Chen added, holding up their container. "Well, I brought coffee, but we can synthesize Tavrian alternatives if you want. Pretty sure the station has the molecular database." Kel stepped forward, all 6 hands positioned in formal greeting. "Captain Chun, crew of the Borrowed Time, welcome to Tavrian Prime. On behalf of the Science Ministry, we thank you for accepting our invitation." Marcus's expression shifted slightly, still friendly, but with an edge of wariness that suggested he absolutely knew this wasn't just a thank you visit. "Happy to be here," he said, diplomatic, professional, completely at odds with the greeting he'd given Joe Rin 30 seconds earlier. "We're curious about these matters of mutual interest you mentioned." "All will be explained," Kelf said. "But first, if you would follow me. We have arranged quarters for you and prepared a briefing regarding the situation." "Situation?" Yuki's voice carried curiosity and concern in equal measure. "The reason we invited you," Kelf said. "The reason we need to understand exactly how humanity remembers. And the reason we need to know what happens when you decide to collect a debt." The docking port went quiet. Marcus and his crew exchanged glances. Some kind of silent communication that Joe Rin's tertiary brain couldn't decode, but recognized as significant. "Lead the way," Marcus said finally. They followed Kelf deeper into the station. Joe Rin fell in a step beside them, because whatever came next, he needed to witness it. Needed to understand what happened when humanity's gift for remembering met the galaxy's much longer memory. The briefing room was designed for Tavrian comfort. Low lighting, precise temperature control, seating that accommodated multiple arm configurations. The humans settled into the chairs without comment, though Joe Rin noticed Sarah adjusting her seat's position with the casual expertise of someone who dealt with alien furniture before. Kelf activated the central display. A star system materialized. 3 planets. 2 asteroid belts. Standard G-type star. "This is the Ventari home system," Kelf began. The human's attention sharpened immediately. Chen sat forward. "We're familiar with Ventari space. We are aware." Kelf gestured, and the display shifted, overlaying medical data and population statistics. 8 years ago, the Ventari suffered a plague event. Hemorrhagic fever variant, cross-species transmission vector, mortality rate approaching 90% in untreated populations. "We know," Marcus said. His voice had gone quiet. "We sent aid. Medical teams, supplies, research support." "You sent 2 billion credits worth of aid," Kelf corrected, "for a species that had no strategic value to humanity. No trade agreements. No military alliances. Nothing except a historical incident 60 years in your past. They helped us when we needed it, Sarah said. Flat, like she was stating a fundamental law of physics. We returned the favor. Keltha's tertiary hands flexed. The aid you provided saved approximately 400,000 Ventari lives. Their civilization still teeters on the edge of collapse, but your intervention prevented complete extinction. Good, Yuki said. Kel studied them. All 4 humans. Calm, certain, completely unbothered by the magnitude of what they'd done. The council did not respond to the Ventari plague for 6 months, Kelth said. Bureaucratic delays. Resource allocation debates. Quarantine concerns. By the time official aid was authorized, the crisis had passed its critical phase, largely due to human intervention. We noticed, Chun said. Their voice carried something sharp. We also noticed that most council species seemed more concerned with infection protocols than saving lives. The council operates on consensus-based decision-making, Kelth replied. Rapid response requires unanimous agreement. This takes time. Time people didn't have, Marcus said. The briefing room settled into uncomfortable silence. Joe Rin watched the exchange with his tertiary brain spinning. The humans weren't angry. Not exactly. But there was something underneath their calm that suggested they'd noticed the council's failure and filed it away for future reference. They remembered everything. Kelth changed the display. A new system appeared. Smaller. Farther from the galactic core. This is the Nhara Collective, Kelth said. Population approximately 2 billion. Mining-based economy. Current status. Facing ecological collapse due to industrial contamination. Projected timeline to uninhabitability. 18 months. Sarah leaned forward. What kind of contamination? Heavy metals in the water system. Atmospheric particulate saturation. Soil degradation across 40% of arable land. Kelth pulled up environmental data. The council has been aware of the situation for 3 years. Let me guess, Yuki said. Bureaucratic delays. Resource allocation debates. Consensus-based decision-making. Keltha's tertiary hands stilled. The Nhara have no strategic value. Their mineral exports are replaceable. Their technology level is insufficient to contribute to council research initiatives. Official aid has been classified as economically non-viable. The humans exchanged glances again. That same silent communication. Why are you telling us this? Marcus asked. His voice had gone very calm, very controlled. Kelth met his eyes. Because 3 months ago, the Nhara Collective sent an emergency appeal to every council species, she said, begging for help, offering trade concessions, mineral rights, anything they could bargain. They received 17 responses. How many offered aid? None. The 17 responses were formal acknowledgments of receipt. Nothing more. The briefing room went very quiet. Chin's coffee container sat forgotten on the table. Sarah's hands had gone still. Yuki was staring at the display like they were memorizing every detail. Marcus just sat there, breathing, processing. You're asking if we're going to help them, he said finally. I am informing you that a species faces extinction and the council has decided not to intervene, Kelth corrected. What you do with that information is your decision. Why? Sarah's voice cut through the tension. Why tell us? Why not just let it happen? Keltha's tertiary hands resumed their flexing. Agitated, uncertain, because Captain Vell's report suggested humanity operates under principles that supersede economic calculation, she said. Because your species helped the Ventari despite having no obligation and no benefit. Because I need to understand if your altruism is consistent or selective. You need to know if we're actually decent people or if we're just performing decency when it's convenient. Marcus translated. Yes. The single word hung in the air. Marcus stood, walked to the display, studied the Nhara system with the intense focus of someone calculating possibilities. What would it take, he asked, to fix this? Actually fix it, not just delay the inevitable. Kelth pulled up a secondary file. Cost analysis. Resource requirements. Technical specifications. Environmental remediation at this scale requires significant infrastructure. Water purification systems. Atmospheric scrubbers. Soil regeneration technology. Estimated cost, 20 billion credits. Timeline, 5 to 7 years of sustained intervention. The council won't pay it. The council has determined the cost-benefit ratio is unfavorable. Marcus turned to face his crew. They looked back. Still that silent communication. Then she nodded. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she nodded too. Yuki grinned. Wild. Reckless. Humanity doesn't forget kindness. But we don't forget indifference either. Marcus turned back to Kelth. We can't do it alone, he said. 20 billion credits is beyond our capacity. But we know people. Human corporations, private donors, non-governmental organizations. People who care more about helping than profit margins. You would organize this? We would start it, Marcus corrected. Make the calls. Connect the resources. Get the right people talking to each other. He paused. But we need something from you first. Keltha's tertiary hand stilled. What do you require? Access. Diplomatic clearance. Official council recognition that this is a legitimate crisis requiring immediate response. Marcus's voice had gone hard. And we need you to tell every species in council space that humanity is intervening. That we're helping. That we're doing what the council decided not to do. You want political leverage. We want people to know that when the established order fails, someone will step up, Marcus said. We want the galaxy to understand that humanity remembers, that we pay our debts, and that we're paying attention to who helps and who walks past. Kelth was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood, all 6 hands positioned in a gesture Jorin had never seen before. Complete formal respect, the kind usually reserved for heads of state. I will provide everything you require, she said, and I will ensure the council understands exactly what humanity is doing and why. Marcus smiled. Not the warm smile he'd given Jorin in the docking port. Something else. Something that carried the weight of 60 years of remembered kindness and 8 years of watching the council fail. Then, we have work to do, he said. The briefing ended. The work began. And somewhere in the black, a species facing extinction received a message that would change everything. Help is coming. Humanity remembers. The message reached the Nhara Collective at 0347 local time. Elder Vass had been awake for 32 hours, watching the atmospheric contamination index climb another 0.3%, watching their world die in increments too small to fight, but large enough to kill. The communication console chimed. Vass almost didn't answer. 17 acknowledgments of receipt. 17 polite refusals wrapped in diplomatic language. 17 different ways of saying you're not worth saving, but protocols were protocols even when protocols had already failed. Vass opened the channel. The message was brief, direct, in galactic standard, but carrying linguistic markers that the translation matrix identified as human origin. Nhara Collective. Asterisk, we have been made aware of your environmental crisis. We are organizing intervention. Asterisk, resource assessment teams will arrive within 30 days. Initial supplies within 60. Full remediation infrastructure within 6 months. Asterisk, you are not alone. Help is coming. Asterisk Marcus Chun asterisk humanity remembers initiative asterisk Vass read it 3 times. Then they triggered the emergency council assembly because either this was real or this was the cruelest joke the universe had yet delivered. And either way, the collective needed to know. The human diplomatic mission on Tavrian Prime became coordination central for what the news feeds were calling the Nhara operation. Ambassador Rachel Kim had expected maybe a dozen responses when Marcus put out the call. She got 400. Human corporations, private foundations, individual donors contributing everything from pocket change to corporate fortunes. Research universities offering teams, medical organizations volunteering personnel, engineering firms proposing infrastructure solutions, and underneath all of it, running like a river of pure, stubborn determination. Asterisk the Ventari helped us once. We never forgot. Now, we help someone else. Asterisk Rachel's office became mission control. Marcus and his crew coordinated from the borrowed time, which had been given permanent docking clearance, and a direct communications line to half the human organizations in known space. Health provided the political leverage, working the council channels with the relentless precision of someone who understood exactly which procedures could be bent and which needed to be broken. Jorin Vell contributed scientific expertise, coordinating with Tavrian research institutions to optimize the environmental remediation protocols. And 6 weeks after that first briefing, the first human ships arrived at Nhara. Not warships, relief vessels, carbohodes, converted passenger liners carrying supplies and personnel and hope wrapped in industrial quantities. The council watched, and the galaxy started to understand what happened when humanity decided to pay a debt forward. Rachel found Marcus in the borrowed time S-galley at 0200 station time. He was drinking coffee that smelled like it had been brewing since the previous geological epoch. The table in front of him displayed logistics data, resource allocation spreadsheets, and what looked like a personal message from one of the Nhara elders. "You should sleep," Rachel said. "Sleep is for people who aren't coordinating planetary remediation efforts," Marcus replied. But he smiled. "Tired. Real. How's the council taking it?" Quietly furious. Publicly supportive. Privately terrified. Rachel poured herself coffee from the pot. It tasted exactly as terrible as it smelled. "You made them look bad. We've made them look like exactly what they are. An organization that prioritizes efficiency over compassion. Some species are calling it imperialism. Human expansion disguised as humanitarian aid." Marcus set down his cup. "Are you worried about that?" Rachel considered. Sipped the terrible coffee. "No, because we're not asking for anything. No trade concessions. No territorial rights. No political leverage. Just helping because we can. Just like the Ventari did. Just like the Ventari did." They sat in comfortable silence, drinking bad coffee and watching the logistics displays update with shipment confirmations and resource deployments. The Ventari heard about this. Marcus said eventually. Sent a message through official channels. They want to contribute. They're still recovering from the plague, but they want to help. Rachel's throat tightened. "What did you tell them?" "I told them we learned from the best teachers." Marcus pulled up the message. Simple. Direct. Carrying the weight of 60 years of gratitude. They're sending what they can. Medical expertise mostly. Some research support. It's not much, but it's everything, Rachel finished. Because it means they remember too. Marcus nodded. "We're building something here. Not just saving the Nhara. Building a network. Species who help. Who remember. Who show up when the established order fails. A network outside council control. A network the council will have to acknowledge." Marcus leaned back in his chair. Exhausted. Satisfied. Let them be terrified. Maybe fear will teach them what compassion didn't. The galley door opened. Chun entered, carrying a data pad and wearing an expression that Rachel had learned meant either very good news or absolutely catastrophic complications. The Nhara sent updated atmospheric readings, Chun said. "The remediation is working. Contamination index dropped 2% in the last week. Good news, then." Marcus's smile widened. "How are they doing?" "The people." Elder Vass sent a personal message. Chun handed over the datapad. "You should read it." Marcus read. His expression shifted, softened. Then, he handed the pad to Rachel. The message was simple. "Captain Chun, *, our children are breathing easier. Our water is clearing. Our soil is healing. *, we will remember this. Not just that you helped. That you helped when no one else would. *, we will remember humanity. *, thank you for remembering us. Elder Vass, *, Rachel's eyes burned. She handed the pad back. "Congratulations," she said. "You've made the galaxy a slightly less terrible place. We've made the galaxy understand that kindness isn't weakness," Marcus corrected. "That memory isn't just nostalgia. That humanity doesn't forget, and we don't forgive indifference." "Careful," Rachel warned. "Gentle. That sounds like a threat." "It's a promise," Marcus said. "We remember who helps. We remember who walks past. And we'll keep remembering long after everyone else has moved on." 3 months into the Nhara operation, The council called an emergency session. Rachel attended as humanity's official representative. Marcus was there via remote feed because someone needed to keep coordinating the actual work, and diplomacy could happen without his physical presence. The council chamber was designed to inspire awe. Massive, ancient, carrying the weight of 3,000 years of galactic civilization. Rachel stood in the human delegation area and felt exactly zero awe. The council speaker, a Thalian dignitary whose species had been mediating disputes since before humanity discovered fire, called the session to order. "We are here to discuss the human intervention in the Nhara crisis," the speaker began. "Specifically, the manner in which this intervention has proceeded without formal council authorization or oversight." Rachel activated her microphone. "With respect, Speaker, the Nhara Collective sent an emergency appeal to every council species 3 months before humanity intervened. The crisis was documented. The need was established. 17 species acknowledged the appeal. 0 species offered aid. The council determined that the cost-benefit analysis did not support intervention," a Karathi representative interjected. "This was a democratic decision based on established economic protocols. The council decided that 2 billion sentient beings weren't worth saving," Rachel corrected. Humanity disagreed. The chamber rippled with murmurs. Diplomatic protocol frowned on direct confrontation, but Rachel was done with diplomatic niceties. "The human intervention violates precedent," another representative argued. "Unilateral action outside council framework destabilizes established order." The established order, Marcus's voice cut through the chamber via the remote feed, was watching a species die because saving them wasn't profitable enough. If that's the order you want to protect, maybe the order needs destabilizing. The murmurs grew louder. The speaker raised 3 appendages for silence. "Captain Chun, your actions, while motivated by admirable intent, have created a political situation that requires resolution. The council must establish boundaries for humanitarian intervention to prevent future incidents." "Incidents," Rachel repeated. "You're calling saving 2 billion lives an incident. We are calling unauthorized intervention an incident," the speaker clarified. "The council cannot function if individual species act unilaterally on matters of galactic significance." Rachel felt something cold settle in her chest. This wasn't about the Nhara. This was about control. About the council reasserting authority over species who had dared to help without permission. "Then, let me be absolutely clear," Rachel said. Her voice carried through the chamber. Calm, controlled, carrying the weight of 400 organizations and 6 billion humans who had contributed to the Nhara effort. "Humanity will not ask permission to provide humanitarian aid. We will not submit cost-benefit analyses before helping species in crisis. We will not wait for council authorization while sentient beings suffer." The chamber went absolutely silent. "We remember the Ventari," Rachel continued. "We remember that they helped us when we were helpless and asked for nothing. We remember that 60 years later, when they faced extinction, we were the first to respond, and we will never stop responding. And we are now building a network of species who believe that helping matters more than protocol." "This is unacceptable," the Karathi representative stated. "This is irreversible," Rachel corrected. "The Nhara will survive. Their world will heal. And every species in this galaxy now knows that when the council fails, humanity shows up." She looked directly at the speaker. "You can try to prevent it. You can establish protocols. You can threaten sanctions. But you cannot stop species from asking us for help, and you cannot stop us from providing it." Marcus's voice came through the feed. Quiet. Certain. The galaxy is watching. They're seeing what happens when compassion meets capacity. When memory meets action. When someone decides that lives matter more than economic efficiency. "We're not building an empire," Rachel said. "We're building something better. A network of species who help. Who remember. Who show up." She paused. "Let the words settle. You can join us. You can oppose us. You can ignore us. But we're not asking permission anymore. The council chamber erupted. Rachel muted her microphone and watched the chaos unfold. Beside her, the Tavrian observer delegation sat in complete silence. Keltha's tertiary hands were positioned in what Rachel's cultural database identified as profound respect. The session dissolved into procedural arguments and protocol debates that would probably last for hours. Rachel didn't stay to watch. She had work to do. 6 months after the first human ships arrived at Nhara, Elder Vass stood on the balcony of the council center and watched the sky. It was blue. Not the sickly gray-green that had dominated for the last decade. Not the particulate-choked haze that had made breathing a deliberate act. Blue. Clear. Carrying clouds that held rain instead of poison. Behind Vass, the council chamber held representatives from 17 species. Not the 17 who had acknowledged the emergency appeal and done nothing. Different 17. Species who had watched humanity's intervention. Who had contributed resources, who had joined the network that Rachel Kim had promised was building. The Ventari were there, still recovering but present, contributing what they could and receiving help in return because the network worked both ways. The Tavrians were there, Kelf serving as diplomatic coordinator because someone needed to translate between human emotional decision-making and everyone else's logic-based frameworks. Even a few smaller species who had never before had voice in galactic matters. Species the Council had overlooked. Species humanity had noticed. Vass turned from the balcony, faced the assembled representatives. 6 months ago, my world was dying, Vass said. Simple. Direct. The Council told us we were not worth saving. Humanity disagreed. The chamber was absolutely quiet. We will remember this, Vass continued. Not just that you saved us. That you cared enough to try. That you showed up when the established order walked past. Vass looked at each representative in turn. The Nhara Collective is joining this network. We are small. We are still recovering. But we have resources. We have knowledge. And we have something else. Vass gestured to the sky visible through the chamber windows. Blue. Clear. Alive. We have proof that this works. That helping matters. That the galaxy can be better than its most efficient calculations. Marcus attended via remote feed from the borrowed time. Rachel could see him in the corner of her visual display. Exhausted. Satisfied. Ready for the next crisis. Because there would be a next crisis. There always was. But now there was a network. Species who helped. Who remembered. Who showed up. The galaxy had taken 3,000 years to build its current order. Humanity was building something new in 6 months. And the best part? They were just getting started. 2 years after the Nhara operation began, Rachel Kim stood in Ambassador's office and composed her annual report to Earth. The report was long, detailed, full of statistics and diplomatic updates and bureaucratic necessities. But the summary was simple. Humanity has established itself as the galactic standard for humanitarian intervention. 17 species have joined the Mutual Aid Network. The Council has revised its protocols for emergency response. We are no longer asking permission to help. Asterisk the Ventari Plague response taught us compassion. Asterisk the Nhara crisis taught us capacity. Asterisk now, we're teaching the galaxy what happens when you combine the two. Asterisk we remember everything. We help everyone. We never forget. Asterisk, and the universe is better for it. Asterisk she sent the report. Then, she pulled up the newest crisis alert. A mining colony on the edge of civilized space. Environmental disaster. Population of 50,000. Council response. Still pending after 3 months of deliberation. Rachel smiled. Opened a channel to the borrowed time. Marcus? We have work to do. Somewhere in the black, a Tavrian scientist named Jorin Vel sat in his research station and watched the news feeds update. Another human intervention. Another species saved. Another addition to the network. His tertiary brain had been tracking the pattern for 2 years. Calculating probabilities. Analyzing outcomes. The conclusions were undeniable. Humanity had fundamentally altered galactic civilization without firing a shot or claiming territory. They had done it through memory, through kindness, through the simple act of showing up when everyone else had walked past. Zhou Ren opened his personal logs, found the entry from 2 years ago, the day a human freighter had altered its route to pull him from a debris field. Added a new entry. Today I understand what I witnessed in that cargo hold. Not just rescue, not just kindness. A fundamental philosophy made manifest. Asterisk humanity remembers. They help. They show up. Asterisk, and the galaxy will never be the same. Asterisk note to future researchers. When humanity says they never forget, believe them. When they promise to help, trust them. When they look at a crisis the Council has deemed economically non-viable, get out of their way. Asterisk, they are building something that will outlast empires. Asterisk, they are building it one act of remembered kindness at a time. Asterisk, and we are all better for bearing witness. Asterisk, Zhou Ren closed the log. Outside his window, the stars continued their eternal dance. But now, scattered among those stars, were species who had learned a new truth. Kindness compounds. Memory endures. And humanity never, ever forgets. The borrowed time jumped to hyperspace, burning toward the next crisis, the next species in need, the next opportunity to prove that the galaxy could be better than its coldest calculations. Marcus sat in the captain's chair, drinking terrible coffee, coordinating with 400 organizations across 3 dozen systems. Sarah kept the engines running with prayer and profanity and absolute expertise. Chun plotted courses toward species the Council had written off. Yuki maintained the communication networks that connected everyone who had decided helping mattered. And somewhere in the black, another distress beacon started screaming. The borrowed time changed course. Because someone needed help. Because humanity remembered what it felt like to be helped. Because 60 years ago, a species called the Ventari had shown kindness to strangers. And humanity was still paying that debt forward. One rescue at a time. One species at a time. One act of defiant compassion at a time. The galaxy had spent 3,000 years building an order based on efficiency. Humanity was building something better. Something that remembered. Something that helped. Something that showed up. And the universe would never forget it.